Yeah. Okay, so brief off-time roadmap. I'm gonna go over our point of infeasibility, and then make the responses against anonymous tips, drugs, and of course feasibility. Okay, starting in 3, 2, 1. Judge, at the end of the day, you're always gonna have to vote for con because first we go to the first case, which is infeasibility. Look, they respond to this weirdly by saying first it's uneducational and debate as looking at everything, but it doesn't matter if it's educational because you have to respond to the fact that most schools cannot have enough money to actually implement SROs or probable cause, and this is the resolution ought, and it supports that, as my partner actually said in his crossfire. So this actually doesn't directly answer the framework, and they cannot answer this anymore, which means that we're technically winning this debate so far and has the most impact. Now, let's move on to our first contention, which is student safety. For anonymous tips, we're basically saying that with under reasonable suspicion, police can actually search students and look for threatening messages in cyberbullying because probable cause doesn't let you do that because anonymous tips require higher evidence in probable cause, so they can't actually do that. And look, remember, anonymous tips, it can save millions of lives for cyberbullying and drugs. And what they respond to is saying that that first it's we have probable cause, but it's solved this. However, anonymous is not in probable cause, so it actually doesn't affect this. And this was at the number 2. The status quo already has a lot of school shootings, but we're saying is that if we already implement probable cause, it's actually going to lead to more school shootings because there is no warrant actually destroying. There's actually no warrant that's going to destroy time or evidence. We move on to our next condition, which is drugs, or our point, which is drugs. And basically, they first say it only makes it worse. However, it does reduce drug use because logically, if students get scanned randomly, they don't know when to take drugs or not. So these students are constantly scared because marijuana stays in your system for 30 days. And then also, their evidence is flawed because their evidence from the Washington Post actually states that there are numerous studies showing there is little evidence of effectiveness, but there's also plenty of evidence from our source that says drug tests are effective and logically it should work. Now, they also said this harms education, but actually, number one, turn this because it actually creates trust because students are actually going to feel safe in their environment because they know teachers are trying to sweep dangerous substances away from their school. And finally, let's move on to our most important thing, which is infeasibility again. They also said another argument by saying it's working in the adult world, but however, again, probable cause is implemented in schools, not in the adult world, and also they don't really explain on this, so you can't really count this response anymore, which is why you have to vote for the con team because we prove the most logical arguments and we have the most impacts. Thank you, Judge.
Okay, is everybody ready? I'm going to give a brief off-time roadmap. In this speech, I'm going to be covering all my arguments, the framework, and the arguments that I've made earlier. And then I'm going to be summarizing them, and I'm going to be responding to the responses that they've made against them. Okay, is everybody ready? Starting now. Okay, so first I'm going to address framework. Our framework is that everything should be addressed, everything in the debate should be allowed, okay? And it should not be just focusing on lives. And they said that it should be focusing on lives, but actually that's number one, that's uneducational because debate is an educational experience. Debate should be there as a learning experience. We have to learn as much as possible, and with their framework, we're not learning as much as we can. And also it's unfair because it's extremely benefiting just their side. It's not benefiting the whole group. Okay, next I'm going to move on to the school to prison pipeline. So the school to prison pipeline is saying that reasonable suspicion standard lets more students be forced to go into the school to prison pipeline because more kids are going to be suspended, expelled, and sent to juvie for breaking minor rules. This has detrimental effects because students are more likely to go to prison and the economy suffers, losing billions of dollars of potential tax money. And also the searches are going to be targeted towards minorities. They're extremely targeting the minorities, and the probable cause standard is going to solve this racism and the pipeline because less students will be sent to juvie, and it makes it harder for teachers to use major punishments for small infractions of rules. My opponent's first response to this was saying that there's no impact because there's zero tolerance, and they said that status quo solves. I'm going to group this with one response. Actually, we're going to reduce the effects by a lot because the reasonable suspicion standard is one of the major causes, and we're taking it away. So that means that we're solving one of the major causes, and they said that we're saving schools and they're also going to use punishment rarely, but actually we have evidence stating that they're using major punishments very often. They said that their next response was that deterrence, because it's going to discourage disruptive behaviors, but actually this is illogical because most kids are going to commit crimes for complex reasons. For example, for drugs, they're going to use drugs because their other friends are using it or that they're addicted, and they said that the debt is being solved, but it's still very high and we can reduce it a whole lot. It's better than doing a little, and they said that it's a counter plan, but actually it's not a counter plan because it's part of what's going to happen. And then they said that reasonable suspicion is decreasing. May I finish my sentence? But still, our recent evidence from the respective professors shows that millions are affected still.
Can you grab me my phone?
Yeah.
You want first question or can I have it?
Oh, okay. Judge ready?
Yeah. All right, let's start time now.
Okay, may I ask the first question?
Yes.
Okay, you made a response to our third contention of infeasibility by first saying that that it's working in adult worlds. Can you please explain this even further?
All right, so in your infeasibility argument, you're going to say like it's hard to implement and stuff, but we've shown you that if we're able to do it in the adult world, then we should be able to do it for schools.
Okay.
Sure, we can do it, but it just costs $23 billion that we don't have, and that you have no method of paying.
Yeah,
two
and
is
the
that
$23 billion that we're losing is because we have reasonable suspicion, which we showed you from the school to prison pipeline.
Do you have any evidence that reasonable suspicion is costing us money right now?
Yeah.
Nothing-
Yes,
It's
we stated in our
in our school to prison pipeline potential.
You told us that kids going to prison costs them money. You never told us that implementing reasonable suspicion costs any money.
No,
in addition, that would be a counterplan because you're telling us to switch money over from one place to another in a specific governmental policy that isn't established by the resolution.
Basically, what we're saying is that by so many people going to prison for minor infractions, we're losing extra tax revenue.
So you're telling us that tax revenue
Yes,
is
it-
going to go okay, that's the exact definition of a counterplan. That's against the rules.
No,
Don't
but
buy
it's
that
gonna be
argument.
going to the government, and the government can use the gain money.
Well, okay, look,
See,
you're
right
still
there,
not
he's explaining it.
You're still not answering the main point here, which I'm asking is like, you said it's working in an adult world, but probable cause is only limited for schools, not in the adult world. So how does this correlate?
But okay, so in your infeasibility argument, you're going to say it's going to be hard to do and it's going to be
Yes,
impractical.
I'm
there's a
telling
reason-
you it's impossible to do.
There's a reason why it's impractical. First, if you go back to our contention, it directly states school budgets are already stretched because the school budget's very low. Not to mention, training teachers also cost a lot of money, and also SROs, like they're not a required part of the state. So it just doesn't mean that you can implement probable cause if it's in the adult world or even a student world, which probable cause isn't even in the adult world. So
Right.
that obviously doesn't make sense. You're agreeing with our infeasibility argument.
Can we
Okay.
move on?
Yeah, you can ask
So
question.
All right, so about school to prison responses, for your second response, you argued that status quo efforts solve, but
Yes.
how are status quo efforts solving if we see clearly that over 3 million students are being suspended and so many, like hundreds of thousands of students are getting sent to law enforcement?
Okay, so remember back to our evidence, we tell you that the amount of kids that are being suspended and expelled in the pipeline, states are cutting down on that. We have almost 100,000 less kids being suspended. You see that in the status quo, it may take time, but we solve for this. Not to mention that you don't prove solvency with your entire probable cause contention as well. Now, I want to move on to the framework. So you guys are telling me that utilitarianism is the only way this entire debate is fair or educational. Shouldn't we weigh what the Constitution, what everything is based on, which is humans having lives?
No.
But then that's the reason that's unfair is because that's what you guys prepared for.
Well, I mean, you guys should have prepared the same thing because obviously lives are the most important thing in...
That's an assumption right there, obviously.
Okay, then
what's
explain
more
why it's
important?
not.
Or what's more important?
Okay,
Let's
so
think everything should be viewed. All the impacts in this round should be viewed as a way.
Okay, but what's the most important thing?
We're
Lives
saying
or
that.
money?
We're saying
Lives or
that.
money or some kids being suspended? Because obviously, if you don't have a life, you can have those things.
We have... Brief off-time roadmap before I begin. I'll be addressing feasibility and then going down to our voters and finally talking about my opponents. Okay. Everyone ready? Yes. Let's start time Now, okay, at the end of the day, you shouldn't be voting for the pro side for a couple of reasons. First, we go to this definition of ought meaning feasibility. Remember that our definition of ought meaning feasibility and their framework are not mutually exclusive. You can have both under the same thing because we don't establish this as a framework. We simply establish it as a prerequisite. And this is going to be really important because unless the pro proves, which they haven't thus far, that we have the funding for this and that we have the support for this, we can't implement probable cause. They don't even get to their arguments on the flow. But then we go on to the two main voter issues in today's debate. The first one is going to be our student safety contention, specifically subpoints A and B, where we talk to you about anonymous tips and drugs. Remember that anonymous tips are crucial to preventing mass shootings. This is because in a reasonable suspicion standard, anonymous tips have the ability to act as a piece of warrant for search. But under the probable cause system, they don't. This is really problematic because we see 28 school shootings being diverted just because of anonymous tips. And then we go to the drugs argument where we're telling you that we're losing 200,000 lives because of drugs automatically. That's going to be the biggest impact in today's debate right there. And that's going to be the most important because we still prove that this happens only under a probable cause system. But then we go on to this second voter issue regarding infeasibility. This is going to be really important because the only argument pro makes to this is that probable cause is working now. Remember that this doesn't address the school resource officers that we bring up. They have no card against this. And that's going to be really important because if they can't prove feasibility, they can't get to their arguments. But then we go on to their contention. First, we can start off with this framework of utilitarianism. All they say is that it's more educational. It isn't more educational because you weigh things based on how they're supposed to weigh. They're telling you a one-size-fits-all argument just because we don't have the proper impact. Just buy anything you want. Don't buy that because it doesn't make sense. You have to buy lives in today's debate. But even if you don't, remember that we still win the school to prison pipeline argument because of response number 5, which went unanswered the entire debate, where they told you, where we tell you that unpunished crimes lead to an increase of more violent crimes. That means if you're voting on crimes in today's debate, you're still voting neg. For these reasons and more, we strongly urge a con ballot. Thank you.
All right, can I give a brief off-time roadmap? So first I'm going to be talking about my contentions, defending it from their response, and then finally I'm going to be addressing their voting issues, and I'm going to be also addressing the framework. All right. So, is everybody ready? Yeah, all right. Starting in 3, 2, 1, go. Judge, in the end of the day, I strongly urge your pro ballot. Our main voting issue in this debate is school to prison pipeline. We need to stop sending kids to juvenile detention for minor offensive. We can do this by implementing probable cause because then you have to get a warrant to search student. This puts the power in experienced judges' hands, not clueless, jealous teachers who unfairly target minorities. Our government could gain tens of billions of dollars by implementing probable cause because millions of formerly incarcerated students would be paying taxes and working jobs. Overall, without the new standard, the government loses tons of money every day, slowly obliterating our economy, and millions of students are being suspended and sent to juvie for no reason. In turn, this devastates their youth and education. So while the con says that they're saving lives pertaining to gun violence or drugs, in reality, they're destroying the lives of millions of students with reasonable suspicion. The one response my opponents brought up in the final focus was that the minor crimes are eventually gonna lead to major crimes, but that's definitely not true because students who commit minor crimes like as they're little or something, students are just learning, and right now we have to send them on the right path. So now I'm going to be responding to their voting issues. Their first voting issue was student safety, and they talked about anonymous tips and drugs. First of all they said about anonymous tips is that it's not going to be in the probable cause standard, but they never explained why it's not going to be in there. Secondly, drugs. If we're going to have to take time out of our day to randomly drug test people, we're significantly harming education, and that's exactly what school is about. And and then lastly, the contention about feasibility is clearly flawed for two huge reasons actually. Probable cause can't be they say that probable cause can't be implemented because it's impractical, but this isn't true because it's clearly being used in the adult world and it's working really well. And additionally, they say that we're not going to have teachers aren't going to know how to do it, but if there's so much at stake, then they're going to have to learn how to do it. So in the end of the day, if you vote pro, you're essentially helping our economy, making sure students have a good education. But if you vote con, you're indirectly ruining this country and the people living in it. Thank you.
Boys. May.
Camera.